Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Stevens. I am a regional manager for Oxford House in Virginia, D.C., and some parts of Maryland. Welcome to the 2022 World Convention, and welcome to the first breakout session. Just to make sure you're in the right room, this is Addiction Research, What's New and Noteworthy. And I'll just start with a couple obligatory announcements that they've asked us to make. Just a reminder that we really need you to keep your lanyards on with your name badges when you're going into sessions. Please silence your phones if you have not already. And if you need to have a conversation, whether it's with the person next to you or on the phone, please step out of the room. No smoking or vaping near the entrances of the hotel. Good luck with that. Dispose of cigarette butts properly and safely. We can manage that, right? We can avoid littering in Seattle, I hope. And please, take notes. If you're with a group, I think they said this during the general session, but if you're with a group from your chapter, your house, try to split up, take notes in the sessions, because what we really are hoping for is that you'll take this information back to your houses and chapters so that it spreads and we can get stronger as an organization as a whole. We will definitely have time for some questions and answers at the end of the session, so please hold your questions until all of the speakers have finished, and we'll have you ask them into the mic once we're done. Okay. So I will just briefly read the description in the program of this panel, and then I'll introduce our speakers. Addiction Research, What's New and Noteworthy. The panelists will discuss recovery research with particular emphasis on studies involving Oxford House residents. Over the years, there has been an enormous amount of research done on the Oxford House model and Oxford House residents. The large body of data about Oxford House and its successful outcomes led the federal government to list Oxford House as a best practice on SAMHSA's National Registry of Evidence-Based Practices and Programs. The Oxford House program was also singled out as a successful program in the 2016 Surgeon General's Report on Addiction. Oxford House Inc. and Oxford House residents have been at the forefront of fostering recovery research. Recovery research was long hampered by the historical focus on anonymity by 12-step groups. While anonymity has its purposes, it has also had the effect of limiting research on recovery. Oxford House residents and alums work to overcome this limitation. John Major has led significant studies on Oxford House and the recovery process in general, and worked closely with Dr. Lenny Jason and his team at Depaul University. The researchers have been assisted in their work by Oxford House residents and alums and by graduate students. So I will introduce all of our speakers. Of course, the first today will be Dr. John Major. He is a professor of psychology at Harry S. Truman College in Chicago, Illinois. He is the primary investigator of Truman College's Oxford House research team and a consultant for DePaul University's Center for Community Research. Dr. Major also serves as a consultant for various attorneys fighting to overcome unfair housing and discriminatory practices against recovery home residents. Fabian Ellie volunteers as a research assistant for the Oxford House research teams at both DePaul University and Harry S. Truman College. She is a post-bachelor student pursuing a doctoral program in psychology. Victoria Valentine also volunteers as a research assistant for the Oxford House research team at Harry S. Truman College. She is a post-bachelor student pursuing a doctoral program in psychology as well. Casey Longan is the Oxford House Incorporated Training and Education Coordinator for Texas. She has been employed with Oxford House since September 1st, 2018. Her recovery date is September 14th, 2011, and she is an alumna of Oxford House Mather in Clackamas, Oregon. She worked as a research, I'm sure I butchered that, sorry. I'm not from the Pacific Northwest. She worked as a research assistant with Dr. Lenny Jason at DePaul University, conducting studies in Oxford houses in several regions, and continues to serve as a consultant for both DePaul University and Harry S. Truman College's Oxford House research teams. She has a degree in criminal justice and is a national certified peer recovery support specialist. And we will close with Justin Bell, MS. Justin is a second-year doctoral student at DePaul University's Community Psychology program. He currently holds research positions at the Center for Community Research and Dr. Nisa Snowhill's lab at DePaul University, as well as the Primals Project at the University of Pennsylvania. I'll just say one thing briefly before Dr. Major comes up, and we will talk about this a little bit more in detail in a session tomorrow called Recovery Housing Research, Why It Matters and Why Participate. So I will be brief, but I just want to say that it truly cannot be overstated the enormous benefit to Oxford House some of this research has had, and the profound debt of gratitude that we all owe to Dr. Lenny Jason, Director of the Center for Community Research at Depaul University, and those who have worked with him and have gone on to pursue research projects of their own to better understand how Oxford House and recovery housing works. Their positive findings about the efficacy of our model helped pave the way for much of our expansion, and I guarantee there are a number of people in this room that would never have had the opportunity to live in an Oxford House were it not for their work. It's an exciting time to be in recovery in Oxford House, and it's also a really interesting time in recovery housing and more generally, recovery research. Our first speaker is one of those individuals who has been doing great work on studying and supporting Oxford House for many years. Please welcome our first speaker, Dr. John Major.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning. Good morning. How y'all doing? Good. Got to tell you, Seattle's got really good food. Okay, I'd like to start out first by making a few acknowledgments. The first one is Dr. Leonard Jason. You see his photo up there on the screen. Yeah, I like to think that Dr. Jason and Paul Malloy were sort of like Dr. Bob and Bill W. These two getting together created something in the addiction research world that was unprecedented. And we know a lot about recovery homes in general because of the research done with the Oxford House model. Unfortunately, Dr. Jason couldn't make it this year, but he sends his very best. He still has a weekly Oxford House research meeting at DePaul University. And hopefully in DC, we all get together and we'll see him in person. Also, there is Dr. Ted Boback, and if you are anywhere near social media, you can't miss this person. He lives on Twitter and whatever those things are. I'm too old to understand social media. But there's a photo of him. He was in DC last year saying, I promise to be back next week or next year and tell you what I found in my dissertation. Well, he's got COVID. So he is not here, but that is a beautiful photo of his dog, Sunday. Sunday like the ice cream sundae. Okay, enough of those acknowledgments. Paul mentioned the DePaul University research team and then the Truman College. I'm a professor at Truman College. I came up under Dr. Jason. History, I've known this guy for over 20 years at these conferences, and it kind of pisses me off because I got way more gray hair and he's yet to have one. I don't know how Paul does it. But we've been at this for a while, and well, I kind of grew up. I'm no longer a student, and now I'm a professional, and I'm established, and I'm at a place called Truman College. But Dr. Jason and I, we're pretty good friends. It doesn't really matter what our academic affiliations are. You know, we really believe in the cause of Oxford House, so don't be tripped up when you hear Truman College or DePaul University. Just kind of look at that synonymously. Okay, I want to give you a quick review of why we're talking today. My latest focus has been on looking at people who would take medications for opioid use disorders. I think we all refer to that as MATS, medication-assisted treatment, formerly known as drug replacement therapy, and probably some things before that. About 7 or 8 years ago, I was given a data set to examine. I did, and it resulted in the first publication of medication-assisted treatment among Oxford House residents. And it seemed like most residents did not have favorable attitudes about people taking medications. So as a result, we collected some data, and you can see on the board a quick citation to 4 studies that came out of that project, and we found that attitudes significantly improved among Oxford House residents across the country. The first paper looked at a small sample in Maryland. These 4 studies looked across the United States, people living in recovery homes that had residents on medications, and the attitude shifted, and I think we know that there had been a significant paradigm shift in recovery homes that adhere to a total abstinence-based model, you know, the 12-step approach like Oxford House, where maybe 10 years ago, not in my backyard, I'm not letting any of these people on medications in my house, to this place where we are today where we have to combine the elements of both the best of both a harm reduction model and a total abstinence model. And as a result, I think that Oxford House has really been doing justice and helping people get clean and sober who are on medications. And really quickly, we found that the attitudes have improved among Oxford House residents. It seems like the attitudes are more favorable when you actually have somebody in your house on medications as opposed to living in a house where, well, I never met a person in real who's got medications going for them, but I don't know. So if you're far away from somebody's reality, you probably have negative attitudes, and we think the data speaks to this idea that if you yourself misuse medications and you yourself are getting high on these medications, that you probably project that on people who are taking them today, and you assume that that's what their MO is. We found that when people live in these homes with at least one other person on medications, they tend to have a better connection with their social support. It helps them reduce their stress. All right, so we know this is sort of like a good thing, but we don't know how and why Oxford House is actually helping these people. We need to understand changes over time. And that brings us to the current project. Last year, I had the good fortune of getting a free meal with Casey and Jackson. Somehow Ted and I crashed the executive committee when they had a lunch break and we got a free meal. And we were like, ooh, free food. But seriously, something about the informal gatherings at these conferences are really helpful. And I think we walked away with a need to try to understand specifically how is it that people on medications are benefiting from this. We want to understand the dynamics. We know that, or we don't know, what kind of medications seem to work better? Are there changes in medication that lead to outcomes? What about the regimens? You know, it's mind-boggling that, to my knowledge, I don't know any studies that scientifically addressed how much medication for how long should a person be on. We just kind of leave this up to the psychiatrist or the the attending physician's judgment. But we're in a unique position to make a contribution, to understand how the physiological aspects of being on medication are probably complemented with the social environments, such as an Oxford House. So we want to understand house size and how that relates region, because certain regions have more resources than other regions, and relate this to things that we know are tried and true outcomes in addiction research, such as abstinence rates, involvement in 12-step groups, psychiatric severity rates from the ASI, the Addiction Severity Index, and abstinence self-efficacy, which is a very important cognitive resource for recovery. So that's what we're doing. I'm about to hand the mic over now to some of my colleagues. And I can say it's been very trying to get people into our study. The first person I'm going to introduce will be Casey. She, as Paul said, had been involved in Depaul University's Oxford House research team several years ago. She was highly instrumental in helping us get the word out in this study. She was very instrumental in helping us get over 250 participants in our study. And we're kind of like at a standstill now because now people don't want to do wave 2. And we said, okay, the conference is this week. Let's put this off and let's troubleshoot this when we come back from Seattle. But she'll speak some of her experiences and what she's been doing on this team, on this project, and other things. And then she'll pass it on to Fabian and Ted, and we'll finish with Justin. But really quick, I have to say that Fabian is at the end, and Victoria is closest to me. They were students of mine. They have their 4-year degrees, and they went to my college to take some psychology courses because they have their mind set on being graduate students of psychology and getting clinical psychology degrees. I have to say, in all my years of working with students and working with researchers and advanced graduate students, they are, words fail me. They're extremely bright, they're conscientious, they show up, they do hard work without complaining about it, and they are keenly interested in the research skills and what you do behind the scenes and learning more about the Oxford House. They were excited to come here. They paid their own airplane ticket to come here. I know a lot of graduate students who are like, oh. But when you have people who are humble and genuinely interested and conscientious like Fabian and Victoria, good things do happen. So I hope you welcome them among our ranks. And with that, I'd like to introduce Casey. Thank you.
Good morning. So I don't have a PowerPoint or any charts to show anybody. I wanted to just kind of roll with it and talk from the heart. Before I got hired with Oxford House, I met Dr. Jason at a convention, and he told me about an opening that they might have, and I was like, there's no way in heck that they are going to hire me because I have multiple felonies. I thought that there was no chance. Everybody has all these letters behind their name. What could I really bring to the table? And I did get hired. And those felonies and my background and having a voice and the things that I have done since then is what made it possible. So I know research can be kind of scary for people, a little intimidating, because I can tell you it was terrifying for me at first. But we have a lot to offer. We have a lot of lived experience that we can bring to the table, and people are very interested by us, especially for people that don't understand what being a person in recovery looks like just yet. Since we're talking about stigma and stuff like that as well, there's all that wrapped around that. And this is what we're here for. This is why we're all in this room. This is why we participate in stuff, is to help break that stigma. If you guys ever get a chance to participate in any research, I highly recommend that you do, because it can open up multiple doors for you. I've been part of helping out with these guys and what they're working on now too, and it is volunteer. I'm volunteering my time because I actually enjoy it. It is really cool to see things happen. It's cool to be on meetings with them and hear their side of stuff. People need to hear what we have to say. All the government, all this, that, all the stuff that is out there, they need to know that we're here. They need to know that we matter, that we're not going anywhere, and we have research that backs that up. I'm not going to ask anybody right now, but if anybody participated in the study that he was talking about, please check your emails. It might have gone into a trash or spam folder, but please check your emails and make sure that you respond to that. When we set out the survey link for this, it's very important, because talking about medication-assisted recovery, there's still a lot of stigma about that, right? I mean, we could lie and say, oh, no, there's not, but there is. Everybody deserves a chance at recovery, no matter what that looks like, no matter what path they're on, and we need to be mindful and remember where we came from. I didn't wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to move into an Oxford house because it sounds like so much fun. This is going to be great. That's not how that worked out. And so think about that moment when you first moved into a house. Even if you're brand new right now and still trying to figure out that piece, think about what it would be like for somebody who might be taking a medication and being in our community where you're supposed to be loved and supported by those individuals, but then it's like, oh no, we're not sure about that. This is where research comes in, right? You can participate in that and get to know more information about things. We need to be really mindful that we are going to continue to lose people, especially if we're adding to that problem and not accepting people for whatever their path to recovery may look like. Who are we to judge somebody? I mean, I want everybody to really think about that. What if everything you have right now in this moment was taken away because, I don't like the way that you recover. It's wrong. We got to be really mindful of that, because we're only harming people in the long run. So if you get a chance, participate in the research, check your emails, and ask these lovely folks questions after this. I assure you, the research part is not that scary once you get involved in it, and our voices matter. Thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Fabienne. I'm not a public speaker. I identify more as a researcher, so bear with me. It's been really great to be part of this team. I was not originally interested in psychology or research. I made a pivot pre-pandemic. I was an art student. I thought I was going to change the world by making weird pieces of crap that people were going to put in their house. But I realized that I had a different skill, and that was for helping people, and that I was way more motivated by that kind of work. And I was fortunate enough to take a class with Dr. Major, and he was just on my level, just a little bit weird, had the right energy, and we vibed very quickly. And this is my first Oxford House conference, and I had the pleasure of being, thank you. Victoria and I were very well received right away. We were at the women's conference yesterday, and it's been a really beautiful thing, and it's only motivated me more to keep doing work with y'all and doing research and seeing how we can help you grow this program, because it's like a pretty amazing thing that you're doing here. And so the more we can collaborate and the more we can cooperate, it would be awesome to keep working with you guys. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Victoria, and I am a volunteer researcher as well. I have my bachelor's in special education because I've always known that I've been good and been passionate about being in like a helping profession, but it's led me to understand that I want to be more in direct contact. So I started in special education, and then I realized that I wanted to take on more of a clinician role. So I went back to school and started taking classes at our city college, and luckily enough, I got linked up with Dr. Major, and he helped me become passionate about research. And I didn't know anything about addiction and recovery, but being a part of this research team has opened my eyes to the amazing things that Oxford House does, and I'm so blessed to be able to be a part of this. So I just wanted to say thank you for welcoming me, and thank you for being a part of the studies, if any of you are, because research is an amazing thing. So thank you for accepting me. I'm so happy to be here and looking forward to talking with you all more. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Justin. I'm a second year in the PhD program at Depaul University. So as John was saying, since Lenny Jason wasn't able to attend, I'm honored to be able to represent Depaul University. We've had an over 30-year relationship with Oxford House, which is pretty amazing. Yeah, it does deserve a round of applause. Yeah, it's been an amazing relationship. It's something that's very rare in the research field. Typically, psychologists kind of sit in their clouds in academia, and they look down on everybody, and they just kind of figure out things. But I think Lenny has kind of exemplified the sort of like self-determination and autonomy sort of model that Oxford House has, and that he really has collaborated with Oxford House, found out what needs Oxford House has, and then used research to kind of get to those needs, fill those needs, and kind of achieve quite a lot for Oxford House. So I just wanted to briefly go over some of this 30-year relationship that we've had to kind of show some of the landmarks and also kind of give a sense of direction of where we're going. So since Oxford House was originally started in 1975, but it wasn't until 1991 that Lenny Jason encountered Oxford House. It was that famous 60 Minutes presentation that I guess Lenny was flipping through the channels one night and happened to stumble upon, and he, out of the blue, he had never done this before, but he thought, you know what, I like this Paul Malloy guy, I like this whole idea about Oxford House, I like a community sort of model to address addiction recovery, and he contacted Paul Malloy, and Paul Malloy was very excited about Lenny's enthusiasm. Lenny is a community psychologist, so he believed that Oxford House really had a lot of potential, and he was one of the first academics to see that, and Paul Malloy was excited to be a part of that. So in 1992, Depaul kind of more formally had a relationship. If any of you aren't aware, there was the first house in Illinois was set up in 1992, but it was kind of a rocky road at the beginning. So they sent somebody to Chicago to kind of get that house started. Unfortunately, the funding that they had from Illinois was caught up in a wire transfer or something like that, and so this person that was sent to Chicago didn't have a place to stay, didn't have an office, and then I guess a couple days into coming in Chicago, almost all their belongings were stolen. So they really didn't have anywhere to go. Oxford House reached out to Depaul University, however, since they had set up this relationship, and Depaul said, great, yeah, we'll set him up. He ended up getting a room with the DePaul's priest because DePaul is a Catholic school. So he lived with the priest for a time, and then Lenny ended up giving him an office, fax machine, because it was 1992, and they ended up getting that first house started, and that house was named the DePaul House after that relationship. Just to show kind of like, the way that research worked, DePaul's research, even in 1995, was pretty fundamental in helping get Oxford House that amazing Supreme Court decision. So if any of you aren't aware, in 1995, the Supreme Court ruled that preventing Oxford House from, entering single-family homes in neighborhood was a form of housing discrimination, which was amazing. Yeah. Yeah, and it was an incredible example of how research was able to affect a community organization. Some of the evidence that was provided in that legal decision was able to make that decision happen. And it's the same sort of stuff that John Major continues to do in some of the court cases that he's involved in. That relationship would then continue. In 2006, we had done a lot of research showing that Oxford House worked. At least we were showing that Oxford House residents seemed to be doing really well in these settings, which was incredible. However, a lot of funding organizations said, we want a comparison study. We want to show that not only is Oxford House good, but it's better than other places. Some people just go home after rehab, or they stay in a sort of professional treatment. We want to show that Oxford House might even be a better choice than that. Paul Malloy had trusted DePaul University so well by that point that he thought, even though there was a potential that people had to be kind of assigned randomly because of the whole way that research is done, that might kind of mess up the system a little bit, the way that people usually come into Oxford House. But Paul Malloy and Lenny sat down, they hashed it out along with other researchers at the time, and they conducted this first study of Oxford House that compared it and showed that it was actually better than what we call treatment as usual. It's much better than going home, and it's even better than continuing to stay in maybe a professional facility. That there's something about having that sort of community and autonomy, a house that follows these 12-step traditions that actually leads people to gain that sort of self-respect and that sense of autonomy for themselves, so they can go on in long-term recovery. And this would lead to, as many of you have probably heard, SAMHSA designated, Oxford House as evidence-based, which, what does that mean? Really, it means that, it was able to access funding, and that it had a sort of research base, and so this would be huge for some of our future grants. So in 2015, NIAAA, which is the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, granted us DePaul University and Oxford House a rather large multi-million-dollar grant, which we were able to then use to look at social relationships in the houses. And there was another $800,000 grant that was just awarded yesterday for a large contingent of people who are all looking at recovery homes, including Oxford House, across the United States. So it really feels like the tide is turning. Like John was kind of alluding to, I don't think Oxford House, of course, has always been trusted. We tend to trust the doctors and the medicine model, and that's great, but these sort of community-level organizations are starting to be more trusted by the academic community and the federal community and the people who are in charge of the funding and stuff. So it's, I guess, what research in this whole relationship, this collaborative relationship, has done. So I wanted to give just a quick peek, yes. It's a new word. I wanted to give a little peek at the recent DePaul research that's been going on. So we have a study that's going on right now using some of our past data as well as census data to look at the growth of Oxford House over time. Mostly, I think we're using this to look at what are the factors that in a community that lead to an Oxford House to be successful, for the residents to be successful, for Oxford House to grow. There's community-level factors that we're looking at. So what are the amenities that are in a community? What is the neighborhood like? What is the economic position of that neighborhood? Somebody compared Oxford House to McDonald's this morning, which I think is interesting because, when McDonald's wants to start a restaurant, they look at what are the factors in here that are going to make sure that franchise is the most successful. And so we want to use this sort of data to say, can we predict if a neighborhood would be the best for the Oxford House residents? And so as we start to do new homes, which I just heard they're going to put 40 new homes in Illinois over the next year or two, which is going to be incredible. But can we, start to predict would this neighborhood be best for an Oxford House to be in, which would be pretty cool. I also mentioned that like multi-million-dollar grant we got in 2015. That helped inform Ted Bobak's dissertation. We're still working on some of that data. We were able to reveal some groundbreaking stuff on social relationships and networks in Oxford House. We were able to show things that, for people who are living in Oxford House, I'm sure are kind of like no duh. But for researchers, they don't always get this stuff right off the bat, and funders and stuff. But we were able to show, Oxford House is really awesome about creating trust, creating relationships, having close ties in an Oxford House leads to long-term recovery. So, it kind of has shown that, these places are important because they create these social relationships. If you just treat the individual as an individual and you say, we'll give you some medication, we'll get you a counselor, that sort of thing, that's awesome, but that doesn't actually create the sort of like networks and families that get created in Oxford House. And we were able to demonstrate some of that with that research. And then we have another study, which I'm kind of conducting with the University of Pennsylvania, which is, I think, should be really, really interesting. I'm excited about because this is the first time we've collaborated with the University of Pennsylvania. But this time we're specifically looking at employees, which I think will be really cool. I think this is kind of one of the first times we've looked at employees of Oxford House too. And as I'm sure a lot of you know, to be an employee of Oxford House means that you have to, have been successful and that you lived in an Oxford House at a certain point. So we want to look at these people who, they have long-term recovery. They're working for this community organization. They're motivated to be in service of other people, and look at like what are the beliefs that these people hold. What are the spiritual practices that they have? What are the things that are really fueling this sort of long-term recovery? And I think it'll be cool to look at like the success cases, so then we can give maybe recommendations to people who are struggling with their recovery. By looking at the people who have succeeded and have done this for so long. And then finally, I just wanted to go over, we are collecting data at the convention, and we really need your help. Oxford House, you guys have been so awesome about participating in our research before, and so we really need your help on this one too. We're doing a brief 10-minute online survey. It's going to assist us and the Oxford House organization in kind of better understanding the health of the residents. We've conducted some previous surveys that show that, some residents do really improve their health in Oxford House, and some don't. Some continue to struggle with things like mobility issues and medications and chronic illness. And so we want to continue to understand how we can help those residents, what their specific needs are. This survey is just a very brief kind of start of that journey. So, it's very basic sort of information about the medications that you take, what your, very brief medical history is, vaccines as well in terms of, COVID and if you had COVID and that sort of stuff. So, it's very basic stuff, but it would be really helpful for us, especially as we try to pursue funding, because sometimes we go to funders and we say, somebody, an Oxford House resident told us this is a really big problem, and they say, well, can you show us that, 100 Oxford House residents told you that so that we know it's a problem? And that's where this sort of data comes in. So I will have a booth somewhere, probably out in that hallway at some point. You'll see I have a giant red blanket I'm going to lay over a table that says Depaul on it. So look for me. Otherwise, I know a lot of you are taking notes. So I have a URL link that isn't on the screen. But if you want to take notes down to bring back to your houses, it is tinyurl.com/Oxford House Survey. I'll say it twice. Yeah. All right, second time, tinyurl.com /Oxford House Survey. It's a confidential survey, by the way. You don't have to provide any sort of contact information or anything like that. It'll be kept confidential, and yeah, you can take it on there. You can read the consent form and what it's all about, and we'd be happy to have your participation. And then I'll be at a booth with a laptop and stuff if you want to take it there at some point during the survey, or during the conference. So yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks from Depaul.
Okay, so we're going to be throwing it out in a bit. Just want to say that down the road in DC next year, hopefully we will be able to show you even more research, particularly looking at recovery resources in relation to your involvement in AA and NA or 12-step involvement. This is something we said last year that we'd be presenting here. Well, we don't have time for that right now, so we're going to table it till next year. Also, there's Ted Boback's dissertation data, and he swore, I'll be in Seattle, or I'll be here next year showing you, well, he got COVID. And that's why I'm wearing this mask. And also, some of you are a little bit too fragrant with your perfumes and your colognes. Supposed to be a little bit on the wrist, behind the ears. You don't bathe in that stuff. Anyway, we'll talk about social networking, some really fabulous stuff from the funding that Justin had mentioned that was awarded to DePaul University back in 2015, and Dane Wilson's virtual recovery survey, and that was a questionnaire that went around last year's convention in DC. So this year, please look for that red blanket with DePaul on it. Please pass the word. It's great that we have this type of collaborative relationship where we're helping you and you're helping us, and it's a good thing. Anyway, and there will be more. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Paul.
We're going to open it up for some questions. Just right before we do, though, since we do have a little bit of time, I just want to give you a couple of the takeaway talking points of the two big studies that DePaul University did back in the early 2000s, just because this is information that you all should have and be able to go when you do presentations in treatment centers or you talk to people about Oxford House. You really ought to be able to even quote some of this research and the findings, because it's really impressive. So, John, correct me if I say any of this wrong, but the NIDIS-funded study, that's the National Institutes on Drug Abuse. So DePaul University recruited about 900 Oxford House members from all over the country. It was a national sample, and they tracked them for 1 year, and they interviewed them at intervals, I believe, of 4 months, 8 months, and 12 months to see how they were doing. They had them do a survey. They were checking in to see if they were abstinent or not. And at the end of a year, 86.5% of all of them were still clean and sober, which is, I mean, really an unheard of success rate in this field. You know, typically 40 to 60% of people, relapse within the first 6 months. But in Oxford House, a year later, 86.5% were still clean and sober. An interesting takeaway from that as well was that the threshold of duration of residency that really started to show the highest rates of success was 6 months. So people that stayed in Oxford House for 6 months or longer were at that top end of, still staying clean and sober after a year. So we always try to encourage our members to at least commit to 6 months in the houses. You guys should do that too. The study that Justin mentioned that was funded by NIAAA and was a comparison, which is great because it's really hard to do a sort of, experiment group, standard group in real life. You can't really tell people, well, you be religious and you don't be religious, or So it was awesome that we had an opportunity to really do that kind of comparison. And they followed, there's about 90 people or something like that coming out of treatment in the Chicago area, and followed them this time for 2 years, and randomly assigned some of them to go into Oxford House, and the others, they just let them go on with the usual care conditions. And at the end of those 2 years, 69% of the Oxford House people were still clean and sober, and only 35% of the people that had just been, left to go sort of do other sort of care conditions. So it was basically twice as many people were clean and sober at the end of those 2 years in Oxford House. They had 3 times lower of a recidivism rate, and their monthly income was like twice as much as the people that had not entered Oxford House. So it's really some amazing followings, but the short and fast one is just 86.5% after a year, which is just fantastic and should impress anyone. Okay, so does anyone have any questions for the panelists? And if so, could you please come up to the microphone?
Hi, my name's Larry. I'm from, is this on? My name's Larry. I'm from South Florida. One of the things you mentioned is actually created a problem in our house. They require a letter, you know, because they're democratically run. There's no house manager or anything. One of the things I noticed, we also have issues with people who have ADHD and have to take amphetamine medication. We need letters from doctors. They want to know that you're in recovery. And for some people, it creates a problem because the psychiatrist doesn't want to provide that letter because then there's nobody that's administering medications. The psychiatrist gets nervous about providing that medication to a home where somebody could abuse it. Medications, nobody's accountable for it. You know, that sort of thing. It created a problem for people. So I was just curious if that might be something that might be looked at further down the line. And because the other thing that came up with the mat situation, I noticed in our household when we had somebody that was on mat, it was easier for someone else to come into the home because we would talk about it. But it was interesting too because when somebody wanted to come into the home and they were on mat, during the election process, somebody's like, oh, no, we don't want them here because, you know, when I did that, I was abusing, you know, they just immediately had them in relapse mode before they even got in the house. And for me, I was thinking we should vote no for this person simply because we're bringing them into a hostile environment if we have people ready to convict them and they haven't even gotten there yet. So that was an issue.
Can you just hand that down? Yeah.
Fancy schmancy. The only thing I can say about the psychiatrist is that's kind of weird. I think it might be an individual thing. I think most physicians.
Only the psychiatry for people in recovery. That was the weird part.
Yeah, you talked to Dr. Gitlow, Stuart Gitlow. You know, I think he was the former president of the American Society of Addiction Medicine. My physician, she's wonderful. She's given me letters for things I need, and it doesn't hide behind this whole like HIPAA thing or confidentiality. That just sounds kind of weird if you ask me. So.
She was fearful others in the house would steal it because they're all drug addicts. There's no accountability for.
Oh, you're talking about the medication.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant just to provide a letter.
No,
oh, I'm
she was
sorry.
nervous because there's no accountability for the medic. There's no nurse, no house manager distributing it. That's
Well, then I think maybe Casey could speak to this. My first thing would be, what does the house... Yeah, I'm going to push it over on Casey. But I think, you know, the fourth tradition, each house has the right to be autonomous, and I know that there are some recovery homes where they have a lockbox, and...
I told her all of that.
Yeah.
That's the fifth tradition, John.
I'll keep coming back. That's right.
I don't even know where to begin right now. So what is the...
No, it's just a statement about educating the house, basically. I mean, there needs to be a way, I don't know how we would do this, but like to provide education to all the houses about MAT in general and about medication.
If you want some training on that, I will give you my phone number.
Yeah, that's
I
what
can help
Casey
you with
does
that.
for a living.
That needs to be provided to all the houses. Because a lot of people in houses have never even heard of MAT. They don't even know what it is. They think it's just
Okay.
an excuse to keep using. They'll even say that.
I'll give you my card, and then we can do something on Zoom. And it's basically an education piece, right? That's where a lot of the fear factor with that comes from because people don't understand it, or they say that they've abused it. Whatever it is, education is key.
And before the next person asks their question, I have a favor to ask you guys, because in the last 5-10 years in the recovery community, we've been talking a lot about how language matters, and you know, some language lends itself to stigmatization, and we're trying to take a look at that and use different language, and we've been kind of adjusting slowly because we're accustomed to the way we refer to things sort of in 12-step communities. But I have a favor to ask you, which is try your best to refer to, and this, I mean, I didn't make this up, right? This is, people are advocating for this, refer to medication as medication-assisted recovery instead of medication-assisted treatment, because people on MAR are in recovery. And when you live in an Oxford house, you're not doing treatment, you're living in recovery. I know the academic community has to sort of agree upon some terms, and they'll typically refer to it as MAP, but in Oxford House, we refer to it as MAR, because we're all in recovery. All right, next question.
My name's Clinton. I'm from Kansas. My question is what kind of research has been done for the medically assisted recovery coming from the streets, treatment centers, county facilities, and Department of Corrections?
I don't know. Next question. No. There's a lot of research out there, and there's a lot more that needs to be done. And I think this is very much it was very much a taboo issue in the recovery community only a decade ago. We're going through that. What kind of pisses me off is that the 12-step people are being accused as perpetuating a sense of stigma. And I think there is some rightful blame for that because individual members will say, hey, Mother Flower, you're using Mother. And now we're realizing that goes against really the nature of recovery, that we accept people for who they are. Oxford House was very first to get on board with that because I think recovery among Oxford House residents usually is a little bit more concentrated than the typical person who's involved in their AA or NA recovery. So we've got a lot of catching up to do. I don't know about people coming off the street. I know that there's controversy in, if you want to call it criminal justice systems, denying people the right to recover that way. And then there's also an exploitation and over-marketing of all medications, not just those for opioid use disorder or what have you. There's a lot. Maybe by the time we get really old and gray and die, maybe we'll have some understanding. So this is really a new frontier.
Next question.
I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Jason. Too bad he's not here today. And thank you to Dr. Major for all your support. With the study with Oxford houses and tribal communities, the Suquamish community has been absolutely amazing with our Oxford house. And I just left there, and so I'm going to be able to take what I learned there and the things, experience I gained to be able to take it to my hometown and my tribe. And having that statistical information is really important, and it's really helpful. And you can tell by the Suquamish tribe, it was their continuing support is still just amazing.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I was just going to say, we were planning on doing some more research with those houses. I was just talking with Ricky about that. There's a lot of funding, luckily, out there for research in the Native American community and indigenous communities about addressing addiction. So we hope to continue that research. So thank you so much.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Joseph. I'm from Delaware. So my first question, and you had addressed the MAT versus MAR, and I think that that's super important to educate the houses and stuff on that. My next question was, of the, we do the surveys annually, that 86% for over a year, does that information, is that solely based off of just the annual surveys that we do, or, okay, so there is an outside. And if so, why is there, we had talked, I think somebody had mentioned there was some surveys as to like helping combat why people are leaving houses, and is there a study to see why people aren't staying for that year, for the 86%? Like why aren't we achieving? Because it's my understanding that the time and the length of stay in houses is actually growing shorter than it used to be. And is there any way that we can combat that and find out why?
I don't want to bogart this microphone, but I will. I think that there's some contextual factors going on. In other words, things outside of the immediate vicinity of the home or the house or the chapter, maybe things like, there was an election year, there's a lot of political divide in our country. COVID, things like that might have some kind of influence. Otherwise, I like to say that these averages are but averages, and even though it comes from a national sample, and I think that the NIDA study that Paul had quoted, I think it was over 11 months, on average, across almost 900 residents, that was the average. Some stay longer, some stay shorter. And if you are experiencing shorter lengths of stay, I really don't know why that might be. Maybe that's just where you are now. I'm a numbers guy. I kind of understand central limit theorem, that I imagine in 20 years, looking at your house, it'll probably even itself out. I think what's great about Oxford House, and we don't say this enough, is that historically, you go to a recovery home and it was managed, and you didn't have, democratic operations in place, and you were time limited. You were out of luck after 6 months, but what I love about Oxford House is you can stay as long as you want. You follow the 3 cardinal rules and any others that are decided upon through the democratic process. And that's a strength. And maybe some people only need a few months, or maybe they hop, skip into an alumni house. I don't know if you could do that. But consistently, really quick, there's another study in alignment with what Paul said. That 6-month marker, actually, there's been several studies. Staying in an Oxford House recovery home 6 months or more will increase your likelihood of staying clean and sober, and making more money, not going to jail or involving yourself in crime and all that kind of good stuff. So there is something about recovery living. If you commit to it, you're going to benefit in the long run.
Absolutely. Tomorrow there will be another session on recovery housing research, and just so you know, I'll actually be talking a little bit about some of the findings from the House Activity Report data that you guys turn in every month. But just to draw the distinction there, that data is a little more limited because we only can say what happened up until the point people left the house. What they did was they followed those people even after they left the house, and so they were aware, even if they had only lived in the house for 2 weeks, they followed up at 4 months, 8 months, 12 months to check on their abstinence rate. So it's a more compelling finding. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Oxford House Amelia from Indiana. I've got two questions, one simple one. First one is, recently I had somebody that we very much suspected was using. We couldn't prove it, and he kept saying he was not. Is there any, from what I understand legally, there's nothing we can do. We can't make him take any kind of like drug test or anything. Is there any way that we can make that definitive? You can? Okay. All right.
Hey.
Okay, let me just,
Hey, so, yeah, you can. However, if you focus on people's behaviors and bring it back to the basics, you shouldn't have to go that route.
and the bottom line on that is that the Oxford House model and the process by which we determine whether a relapse has occurred is one that is determined by a house observing behavior and then voting.
Okay.
Which is not to say that a UA could not be something that would inform their decision, but we prefer for houses to focus on behaviors and not rely on the testing. But it's not prohibited.
Okay. Well, that was my easy one. Okay, and this is a little bit harder. Everything basically is about supply and demand. We have a pretty big demand in my city for expansion. What's the process of going through them?
There's going to be some other
Yeah, there's some panels
for
talking
that.
about expansion.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
And
thank
talk
you.
to your outreach worker.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, my name is Catherine, and I'm from Indiana as well. I just have a quick question. Do you guys have a booth set up after this panel for which we could reach you for other questions? And where will that be at?
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure where my table is going to be, but it should be out in this hallway. So if you want to talk research, have other questions. Red blanket, yes. If you have, and I encourage everybody to come up and talk if you have any research ideas, or if you're interested in even volunteering or something like that. There's opportunities out there, even just to help out in a small part or to lend your experience or something to us. We're always really appreciative of that. So yeah, somewhere out there with a red blanket, probably within 15 minutes after this session. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Brock, and I'm from Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Indiana's up here representing, it seems like. But, so I have a question. So, I'm really lucky to be from an area where we have a really good relationship with the court services. It's incredible. I mean, they'll even pay the bed deposit for people. And we've worked really hard on, So we've worked really hard on that relationship, and it's been a big help having people in reentry come out, talk to their probation officer, and Oxford House be one of the first recommendations for success. But we also just recently opened a house in Columbus, and we're getting a lot of pushback from the court services there. So my question is there been any research or any contemplation on conducting research on the success or the failure of the relationship between the court services and how that like impacts? Do you see what I'm saying? I guess I didn't word that really great, but just like the relationship between court services, Oxford House, and how that contributes to success.
I mean,
Okay, so we have conducted some studies, which, you know, if you want to talk to me after or whatever, I could definitely send that stuff to you if you're interested in looking at that. But we have shown that people who come out of incarceration and go into these Oxford homes tend to do well, that they tend to have, you know, less criminal recidivism, which is just a big word for, you know, they don't go back as much as people who aren't in those Oxford homes. And just go into that, again, that treatment as usual stuff. So we've shown that that's really important, that living in those sort of community environments seems to work well, even for people who are exiting incarceration. It's awesome to hear that you have a relationship where you're at, but yeah, unfortunately, from what I've heard, a lot of court systems don't tend to immediately recognize Oxford House or recovery homes in general as a place to go, that there's a, you know, of course, a sense of fear that, you know, oh, you're going to live with somebody, or you're going to create a group of people who all have a criminal history, and, you know, what could that lead to? So, you know, I guess, you know, I can send you those studies, and you can take a look at those, and, you know, maybe try to, you know, initiate that relationship by sending that sort of stuff, sending those sort of figures. You know, we've planned in the future to do some more stuff. I think it would be really awesome to continue to do stuff with people who were formerly incarcerated, because I believe that they deserve a chance, obviously. So feel free to talk to me after, and I can find the specifics on that stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Rocky.
I'm sorry, just gonna,
Oxford House here in
I'm going to try to
Washington.
add to that question real quick. What Justin said, there's a lot of research out there because we got a grant looking at ex-offenders, it's the title we use then. So it's going to be kind of hard to, you know, give 1 or 2 or 4 or 5 studies. The person has to read it through and connect the dots. I think it makes a compelling case, but there's also some kind of political thing. Maybe in Columbus, they don't like the way you do it where you are, and then there might be some kind of discord between the 2 different court systems. Maybe it has something to do with political beliefs or God knows what, but I agree with Justin. You could send them some articles, and they're quite compelling. People coming out of criminal justice systems having comparable, if not slightly better outcomes going to an Oxford House than a very expensive modified therapeutic community. So I just wanted to add that real quick.
thanks.
Sir?
Go ahead.
My name's Rocky. I'm from Wenatchee, Oxford House here in Washington. I had a question. Is there any research done on the comparisons, say the success rate of, say, Vivitrol compared to Suboxone?
Oh, give me.
You can bogart the mic. It's okay.
No. But we need that. We need more information about characteristics of the drug types, the protocols that they're on. I mean, and I'm sorry for saying MATs. I'm going to try to get my mind around MARs. I'm kind of thick-headed, not intentionally, just I was born that way. But what gets me is there needs to be the behavioral and social environmental components to the use of medications. I mean, I've been around a few 24 hours, and I've heard people say, you know, this is Narcotics Anonymous, not Psychotics Anonymous, because people are sharing their experience, strength, and hope about being on medications. And we've come a long way in NA, and I know we got a lot more to go. And it'd be really great to take a look at these things. I don't think one drug is better than another. I might be cool with Vivitrol. Fabienne might be great on methadone. Vicky might be great on Suboxone, where Justin is great on Subutex. You know, and Casey probably is not on any medications. You know, there's going to be some variation, but we need to know, because then individuals could be informed. Then maybe houses could say, like, well, you're going to see your doctor about this. You might want to consider this because the research suggests that. You know what I mean? So that's what we're trying to get people involved in our we should call MAR studies now.
I have
All right,
one more
cool.
quick question. The 86.5%, I love those stats. I use it when I do a panel at the treatment center. But of the 900 people that study was conducted on, was it done in all one region, or was it throughout the United States?
All over the country.
Okay,
Yeah, sure.
thank you guys. And why is your blanket red when the mascot for Depaul is the Blue Demons?
I don't know. Lenny gave it to me, and I have no idea where he got that.
There you go.
I don't know if it's bootleg or what. But.
So bear with me, my heart's in my throat, but as a lot of snow growth begins outside the comfort zone. So first of all, thank you very much for your time and your service. Cannot express how much that means to myself, and I'm sure a lot of us. I just want to say from my own personal experience that I'm one of those people who was a staunchly against people who were on Mattermar. You know, because my recovery looked like I white knuckled through it. You know, I puked for 3 weeks, locked in a trailer, and my friend brought me soda crackers. And anyway, but no two people's recovery looks the same. So enough of that. To my question. I was hoping that there was going to be something about the long-term effects of substance abuse on our mental health. And, you know, because there's a difference between what we're masking with in our mental health with our substance use and the drug-induced psychosis that comes with it. And then, you know, once that has subsided, the things that are actually still wrong between that aren't necessarily the way we want them, between our ears. And, you know, how much of that is from our extended, you know, substance use, and how much of it was there to begin with. And if there's any research, you know, going on about the extended effects of our substance use on our mental health.
OMFG. I am so fucking with researchers, psychiatrists, practitioners who really skip over substance-induced effects. I mean, you want to see me really pissed off, put me in a room with a psychiatrist who's going to tell me I'm putting this person on this medication. And I'm like, oh, on what basis? Because I feel that. I'm like, mother flower, you feel is dictating your clinical decisions. And that is the norm in psychiatry. I've worked at Hopkins Hospital in psychiatry. I've worked with some people who really had a sharp mind, but had basis for why they were putting the medications. And there's very little research. The last person doing this, I think, systematically was Brian J. Adenoff, University of Texas Southwest, looking at hypothalamic pituitary adrenal system functioning, basically some of the hard wiring stuff with the release of our cortisol in early abstinence, that we were basically messed up, but after a month later, these alcoholic men are still kind of messed up. And now he started looking at cocaine-addicted people, but that was 15 years ago. I've been looking at the literature. Nobody, I mean, when I went through rehab in '84, man, I had a migraine. I couldn't get one aspirin because they had the good sense. You clean somebody out for 30 days, and then you could determine the signs and the symptoms, whether they're indicative of the substance use disorder or maybe a co-occurring. And I got the news to tell you. The data tells me no more, or on average, 15% of people who have a substance use disorder like us have a co-occurring disorder. But they're overusing that term to justify insurance reimbursements. And everybody in the meetings I go to, they got 6 mother flower mental disorders. Right. That's not good clinical practice. No, you should have 1, no more than 2. So there's a lot of bad diagnoses going on, and there's little research to guide practitioners. And I think the really savvy ones have done their homework, and that's unfortunately more the exception. I would love to see more of this stuff, because I believe in my heart of hearts, some people need medication, some people need psychotherapy, some people need to get their asses into church or something like that, but we all vary. So I hope I answered that.
Dr. Stuart Gitlow will be speaking later in the convention, and he often mentions in his talk some of the stuff about over-medicating people in early recovery, so you might get some more information out of him.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, we have 8 minutes left, so we're going to move into quick question and quick answer mode, so all 4 of these people who have been waiting patiently can go.
Yes, my name is Travis Massa, Orlando, Florida. I have 2 questions. I'll try to keep them as brief as possible. They're about medicine used in medical-assisted recovery. The first one is there any data or research in reference to the medications used on their effect of the corticotropin releasing factor? And my second question is, after I heard that you were at Johns Hopkins University, the new research and data showing on the effects of psilocybin for addiction and other mental illness.
First question, no. Ask Dr. Gitlow. He's a real doctor. I act like one in the classroom. Second, psilocybin. Things come up, I think, in trends every 10 or 15 years. They call it something different, but they present it like it's something new. And I came across an abstract of an article, like, let's give psilocybin for people who are addicted, or let's give them marijuana who have post-traumatic stress disorder and recovering from substance use disorder. You don't give pot to somebody in recovery who's got PTSD to alleviate the symptoms. They need to deal with it. And there's some psychotherapeutic ways of dealing with that. That's a very real thing. But somehow it got like, that soup du jour. Now it's very much in vogue. Let's use medications and psilocybins. And yeah, personally, I think people should trip to open up their minds. But, for people in recovery, not a good thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
And I just want to say quickly, the way that psilocybin works is a transcendental experience, right? It's a mind expansion experience, and you don't need drugs to get that. I ran a study last year showing that people in Oxford House who had a spiritual awakening as a result of working the steps had much better outcomes than those who did not. So, just to say that, if you're seeking a transcendental experience, maybe try doing some step work.
Nice.
I'm Michael from Lakewood. Is there any research on MAR treatment and overdose deaths?
Lots.
Sorry, I'm going to try to be really quick. I was really pissed off because somebody from an agency about 6-7 years ago came in here and was shaming us for smoking and saying that they're drugs that help us get off cigarettes, and we would also enhance our recovery if we went on MAR. And then somebody came up here like, well, I was on MAR forever, it didn't work for me, and this is working fine. Why are you suggesting I should be on medications when this is working for me? So that got me really pissed off, and I came in here the next year waiting to go toe-to-toe with this person who wasn't there, and I kind of pissed off the feel-good moment about MAR. Because I showed data from Johns Hopkins University. I worked with the hospital, but this university coming from the School of Public Health showed mortality rates in relation to methadone misuse. So there's a lot of diversion or black market use of these drugs. And I've no doubt there's a lot of people dying from it. And I kind of question the way that it's being regulated or not being regulated. That's my concern. I got no problem somebody trying to get a pathway to recovery. But when you market it to the masses, it's, like my nephew who went to the Citadel OD'd on prescriptive opioids because they had access to it. And there's a little mindset about the half-life effects of methadone and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a very dark side of it that should be addressed.
Okay. Great.
My name's Felicia. I'm with Arizona. So my question was with the MAT and MAR, I guess, Suboxone and methadone, with it being a narcotic, how does the body sustain the withdrawal with us being addicts? How are we able to tell whether we're using it as a tool? I mean, not as a tool, as a, I guess, how do you say it? Dang, I got all nervous. Like using it for us to use it like as prescribed or abuse. Like how do we determine that? Like with us being addicts or having the addict minds at the end of the day.
Ask your doctor to see if it's right for you.
Well, no, I don't take it personally.
No, I'm kidding, and I should have been smart as I was saying that. I think that there are people who are prescribed. It's up to a physician. I don't know what's in their mind. Some people, they realize here's the right dose, and some want to be on a maintenance, and some eventually will go onto a taper. And that is something we need to research down the road. But we should know that it's up to my physician. She's telling me I need this. Okay, this seems to work. And I think the litmus test is, am I using anything else on the side? If I'm not, and I'm staying totally abstinent with the prescription from my physician, I'm doing it right. That's working.
Okay.
All right. Thanks. All right.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm from South Florida, and I was reunified with my children at Oxford House. I'm also peer specialist, and I work with a lot of women that are working towards that. We have some DCF agents, CPS agents that are fine with it, and some that absolutely will not do it. I was wondering if you guys have given any thought to doing any studies on reunification with children in Oxford House.
We have some studies, and I think that came from the NIDA project and NIAAA that got award in 2000, looking at women and children in Oxford houses. So maybe you could pester Justin, he might have to go on the web. I know Dr. Jason posts all the publications. There's been a few looking at women and children, and I'm so happy to hear that we continue doing this. And I think there's some men with children in Oxford houses, maybe a couple of them, but a lot more women and children.
Thank you.
All right, let's thank all of our panelists. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. We got 2 minutes.
My name is James Vaughn. I'm a Seattle local. Do you have any empirical statistics regarding success rates with a specific emphasis on opioid use disorder with naltrexone? Do you have any statistics available regarding that to bring home?
Nope. But hopefully, if we get some people to comply and follow up, we will have some statistics.
Yeah, we hope to conduct more. Obviously, John Major's study right now, and then hopefully the follow-up to the study that we're kind of conducting at the conference, we'll be looking at some of those like more specific medication questions, like somebody else asked about comparing MAR treatments and stuff. So that'll be in the future.
But I will say there seems to be a trend that there's a preference to residents being on Suboxone versus methadone. So, but that's a general kind of finding. It's not absolute.
If you participate in any of the research or go onto the surveys, make sure that you fill them all the way out, because it's not going to be counted as full information. Like if there's a wave 2 that follows up after the fact, we need everybody to complete everything all the way through. Otherwise, it's not going to be helpful. Thank you. And then you get a gift card.
Oh, all
I
right.
like money, right? We like money.
All right, thank you, everyone. We appreciate your attention. There'll be a 15-minute break, and we'll start our breakout number 2.